BlackRock has more influence over the American state than the American state has over BlackRock. So what power does the U.S. government have over BlackRock? Do they have any power over BlackRock? Well, we ran that through our RPI system as well. Spoiler alert, they have very little power over BlackRock. And that reveals that the American government is no longer sovereign. Because really, can the American government tell BlackRock what to do? Well, technically, yes, but practically, no. Functionally, no. They could pass regulations, they could threaten antitrust action, but in reality, they don't and they won't. And if they tried,
Hello, brothers and sisters. I really hope you're all doing fine from wherever you are watching me from. Now, Shahid Bolsen has been calling out on the African leaders to come together and realize that it is time to work for their people and saying no to imperialism that is coming from the West. Now, he has been also commenting on the Western culture that has destroyed countries, that has destroyed morals across the world and across Africa. So let's watch this video, then have a really quick discussion at the end of it. Thank you so much.
they'd pay the price. BlackRock has lawyers, they have lobbyists, they have leverage in every relevant agency. So relative to BlackRock, we gave the U.S. a 3 out of 10 in decision authority over BlackRock. That's the level of a weak junior partner in a business deal. If the U.S. clamps down, BlackRock just pivots offshore, restructures its portfolios, keeps operating globally. So that's a 2.5 out of 10 in terms of control over inputs. So what about narrative control? I mean, you'd think that the U.S. government, with its media and its institutions, its global cultural dominance and so forth, that they could at least frame the public perception of BlackRock, but no, they don't, and they won't even try. Again, public discourse around BlackRock is marginal. You never see congressional hearings about it. You rarely even hear their name in mainstream public political debates. And when you do, it's vague and sanitized. No one's going to talk about BlackRock. Not to mention, all of the media corporations are actually owned by BlackRock. So the U.S. government versus BlackRock in terms of narrative control gets a 3.5. Now we ask, what happens if the U.S. Tries to confront BlackRock? Can they act without fear of blowback from BlackRock? Well, obviously no. Any serious confrontation by the U.S. government against BlackRock would destabilize their pension systems. It would tank their markets. It would trigger capital flight. No, BlackRock is too entangled to attack. That's what you call mutual hostage governance, except the hostage in this case is the government. So there's a score of 2.0 in terms of the ability to retaliate or the ability to control BlackRock. You simply cannot. And can the U.S. adapt with regards to BlackRock? Could they replace BlackRock's role? Could they build alternatives, take back control? Well, not without enormous systemic pain. The state has no institutional substitute for what BlackRock does. Management of retirement assets, stabilizing markets, advising the Fed, on and on. So that's a 2.0 on the U.S. government's adaptability reserve. They're stuck. How dependent is the U.S. on BlackRock? On capital, very. On asset management, completely. On market sentiment and investment flows, totally. So their dependency, America's dependency on BlackRock is a 7 out of 10. How vulnerable is the U.S. to disruption by BlackRock? Well, all BlackRock has to do is shift some capital. All they have to do is adjust some ESG compliance ratings or pull out of a market segment, and entire sectors of the economy could collapse. So that's a 6.5 score. How is the U.S. perceived compared to how BlackRock is perceived? Is America seen as strong and in control, or is it seen as weakened, as captured, as subservient to forces that it can no longer discipline? Well, that's a score of 7.0. If you add it all up, the U.S. relative power over BlackRock is negative 7.5. That's negative functional leverage. While BlackRock's relative power over the U.S. is plus 30. It means that America doesn't govern its corporate elite governs America. We need to be clear, this is not partnership, this is occupation. Okay, it's not military occupation, but economic occupation. You have a non-state actor that has greater decision-making power than the state. It can outmaneuver, it can outlast, and it outleverages the government that's supposed to regulate it. No, BlackRock is not an American company. It's a post-national institution. It's a private sovereign. It's a private sovereign embedded in the global system. Oh, but it gets worse. It gets worse for America. America's current power is no longer its own. As we said, it's been captured. It's been subordinated to the owners and controllers of global financialized capital. They still have power, but it's not their own. But even that status, as the strong man of the OCGFC, even that status is temporary because the role itself is being phased out. The United States is being decommissioned. Understand? Not destroyed, not invaded, but strategically disassembled, gradually and deliberately by the very elites who once empowered it, because their system is evolving beyond the need, as I said, for a single hegemon. This isn't a theory. We can map it. We've done it. Using the Middle Nation Relative Power Index, we've projected the trajectory of the United States all the way up to the year 2050. And the result is quite sobering, or it should be for American citizens. I mean, right now, America's RPI is plus 12, like I said. By 2050, it drops to -7. A negative RPI means that the United States will be more vulnerable than it is dominant. It means that it will be shaped more than it shapes others. It will act less and be acted upon more. Okay, it will still have weapons, it will still have wealth, but it won't have control. Decision authority will be gone. Global governance is fragmenting. BRICS Plus, alternative institutions, regional pacts are rendering U.S. power frameworks obsolete. The U.S. is no longer going to be able to dictate global rules. Their control of inputs will be weak. America will be dependent on supply chains that it does not control, critical minerals that it does not possess, and foreign investors that they cannot defy. Their narrative control will be eroded. The world is no longer going to listen to them. Their monopoly on truth, morality, aspirations is broken completely by the year 2050. Multipolar epistemologies are rising even from now. America's voice already is just one among many. It's not the most credible voice. It's not the most listened to voice. And their immunity to retaliation will be fragile in 2050. Cyber war, financial sanctions, strategic decoupling, no. America is no longer going to enjoy the luxury of being able to act without consequences. And their, what we call their adaptability reserve, is going to be almost exhausted by 2050. Political paralysis, social fragmentation, unsustainable debt, crumbling infrastructure, that will choke any effort at serious reform. Not to mention there's no real desire for it. There's no will for it. Okay? So that's the dominance side of the equation of the RPI index. Now talk about dependency. America is going to be deeply dependent on foreign capital, on labor, on foreign manufacturing, on foreign resources, foreign controlled resources. And it's going to be exposed to the threat of disruption on every front, from within and from without. Their perceived vulnerability will be obvious. It will be global and it will be persistent. So what does the -7 RPI mean for the United States? It means that America, by mid-century, will no longer be the central power of the international system. It will not be feared. It will not be emulated, and it will not be trusted. It will be seen as unstable, volatile, overextended, and irrelevant to the decisions that are shaping the world's future. It's not necessarily something to celebrate or to gloat about, but it's something to understand because it changes the strategic landscape. It means the enforcement arm of financialized capital is failing. The illusion of American-led order is fading. And the real opportunity to build an alternative, equitable, sovereign, decolonized, that opportunity is now. Middle Nation doesn't just observe these changes, we prepare for them. We're trying to build the tools, the doctrine, the consciousness, and the cohesion that's going to be necessary to navigate what comes next. So now we've established that the United States, though still powerful on paper, is not using that power for itself, and by 2050, it won't even have that power anymore. The architecture of functional dominance that once underpinned the Western-led order is being hollowed out. But here's the thing. Power doesn't just vanish, it relocates. So where's it going? It's moving east and it's moving south. It's moving into the hands of a coalition that was once peripheral, fragmented, and marginalized. But today, they're consolidating, they're coordinating, and they're rising. And of course, I'm talking about BRICS. Now, I want you to understand this clearly. BRICS is not just a talking shop anymore. It's not just a slogan about multipolarity. It is becoming the functional center of the global power transition. We've measured it. If we put BRICS through the Middle Nation Relative Power Index, our system for calculating real leverage in the world, we've evaluated BRICS and we've evaluated it as a block. And what we found is decisive. BRICS currently holds an RPI of plus 27. Okay, that's super dominant. That's a super dominant rating. And it's not theoretical, that's operational, it's functional. You can identify what's really driving it. They have control of inputs, that's first. The BRICS nations collectively control the raw material base of the future. Oil, gas, food, rare earths, population, ports, everything. If you want to manufacture, if you want to grow, if you want to move anything, you are increasingly dependent on BRICS countries. The second big driver of why BRICS has a high score in the relative power index is what you could say is immunity and redundancy. The US used to rule the world by threatening isolation or by threatening sanctions, but BRICS, they're building alternatives. Alternative payment systems, trade routes, currencies, even their own ratings agencies, their own development banks. The ability of the West to punish BRICS countries is decaying, it's weakening, while the ability of BRICS countries to resist and to retaliate is growing. Third, their adaptability. Most BRICS members are not what you call legacy powers. They're not locked into rigid ideological or institutional models. They're innovative. They can pivot. And most importantly, they can build because they still have young populations, so they can build. They have unexploited potential, and they have a hunger to rise. And then, according to the vector or the criteria of narrative control, well, they have legitimacy. Let's be honest, the world is tired of Western hypocrisy. The world is tired of being lectured on democracy by war criminals. They're tired of being told to trust in a system that has stolen from them for centuries. BRICS doesn't pretend to be perfect. It doesn't claim moral supremacy. BRICS just offers partnership instead of domination. That in and of itself is powerful. Harmony is powerful. And finally, BRICS has strategic cohesion. Yeah, everyone knows BRICS is diverse, but that diversity is no longer seen as weakness. It's becoming a strength, functionally. Different civilizations, different systems, different strengths, coordinated through trade, through diplomacy, and through mutual interest. Okay, that's not a traditional empire. That's a decentralized network of sovereignty, collective sovereignty. So let me put it plainly. As the US RPI drops into negative territory, BRICS Plus is ascending into historic dominance over the next 25 years. The future of functional power will not be American. It will not be European. It will not be Western. It will be multipolar, decentralized, and led by the global South. This isn't the end of world order. It's the end of their world order. And at Middle Nation, we're not trying to stand by the sidelines. We're trying to prepare people to lead in what comes next as civilizational actors with clarity, with direction, and with sovereignty. And what comes next is the end of American functional dominance. Okay, the empire is still standing, but the lights are off. And those who understand that now are going to be the ones who shape what rises after that falls. We've talked about the collapse of American power. We've seen that the US, the United States, by 2050 is no longer going to be the axis of the international system. Not just because it declined, but because something else rose. Relative power. Something decentralized rose, diverse, aligned with the reality of a post-Western world. BRICS, the collective sovereignty of the Muslim world, so on and so on. So now let's talk about where they're heading. By 2050, BRICS will hold an RPI of plus 38. Let me say that again, plus 38. It means that by mid-century, BRICS will not simply be an alternative to Western power. It will be the gravitational center of global power. This is not projection by fantasy. This is based on measurable dynamics. The decision authority by 2050, BRICS is going to be making the rules, not asking to be included, not submitting proposals. They're going to be writing the frameworks of trade, the frameworks of conflict resolution, for cross-border digital systems, for economic development. They're going to write the rules. The G7 won't be setting the global agenda anymore. The world is going to look to Johannesburg, to Riyadh, to Delhi, to Shanghai. In terms of control of inputs, well, obviously, it's total. BRICS will dominate the energy market, whether that's fossil fuels or renewable energy. It's going to control the agricultural belts that feed the world, the rare earths, the shipping corridors, the industrial manufacturing, the ports. All of this is concentrated within the BRICS bloc. If you want to move, if you want to build, if you want to power anything in 2050, BRICS is going to be at the center of that process. And in terms of narrative control, okay, the West's monopoly is over. The West lost the microphone. By 2050, they lost the microphone. By 2050, you'll have media networks, you'll have academic institutions, you'll have AI systems within BRICS that are shaping public consciousness. They won't be parroting Western dogma either. They'll be articulating indigenous, Islamic, African, and Asian frameworks and Latin American frameworks. And in terms of their immunity to retaliation, well, by then, Western sanctions will be irrelevant. They'll have their own payment system. They'll have their own payment networks, their own currencies, their own capital markets. Well, they'll be sanction-proof by 2050. No one is going to be able to threaten them. No one's going to be able to threaten BRICS, not without serious cost. And their adaptability, obviously, they're young, fast-moving, future-oriented. They're going to be flexible where the West is brittle. They're going to be responsive where the West is paralyzed. They're going to be forward-looking while the West is trying to relive its past. And here's the important part. They're not going to be dependent on the West. They won't depend on the West. Their supply chains, internal. Their markets, internal. Their technologies, independent and internally created. Their ideology, authentic. Their moral legitimacy rising. By 2050, BRICS won't be asking to join the table. They will be the table. They won't seek validation from Western powers. They will be the ones to provide validation or to withhold it. And obviously, this isn't going to be some new unipolarity. It won't be imperialism under a new name. We're talking about collective sovereignty. It will be a civilizational bloc, a post-colonial, post-Western consortium of power, where values are not dictated by some decaying, out-of-touch, deceitful elite, and where their strength isn't going to be measured by missiles, but how many people want to stand with them, by how many people support them. So the West collapses inward and BRICS expands outward. But what we're trying to do with Middle Nation is to prepare, like I say, to prepare our people to thrive, not by begging for inclusion, but by building where the future actually is. This is the global realignment. And we're not just observers, we are participants. So, okay, I talked about the power of BlackRock. Well, how much power does BRICS have over BlackRock or vice versa? The answer is BRICS power is growing and it's real. I mean, let's be clear. Obviously, BRICS doesn't regulate BlackRock. They don't license it. They don't police it. They can't do that in any meaningful way. But here's what BRICS does control. The food that BlackRock invests in, the energy that BlackRock invests in and depends on, the minerals, the markets, the labor, the infrastructure that BlackRock needs in order to remain profitable. That's what we call control of inputs. And BRICS score is a 7.5 out of 10. That's a powerful position. Because you don't need to control the firm itself if you control what the firm needs to function. You understand me? The Global South's economic immunity is increasing. In the past, Global South economies were like sitting ducks. You know, Western capital could enter and exit at will and cause chaos with no consequences for them. If you didn't play by the rules of the asset managers, you could get punished. But that's changing. BRICS plus economies are building immunity to retaliation. They're creating alternatives to SWIFT. You know, they're trying to find ways to bypass the dollar. They're using sovereign development banks now instead of relying on Western financiers. So we gave BRICS a score of 6.5 out of 10 for immunity to retaliation. It's not perfect, but they're not defenseless because they can walk away. This is key. BRICS doesn't need BlackRock. Understand me. The bloc is becoming increasingly self-sufficient with internal trade, domestic investment flows, and their own regional capital structures. They're building the ability to walk away from Western capital, to disengage, to redirect, and still grow. So that's an adaptability reserve of 8.0 out of 10. That means that if BlackRock pulls out, they survive. But if BRICS stops engaging with BlackRock, well, BlackRock suffers. So what's holding them back from doing that? Well, first, they don't have decision authority over BlackRock. Their score is low. They can't pass laws that bind BlackRock. They don't control the global narrative the way that BlackRock does compared to BlackRock. BlackRock still dominates ESG discourse, for example, best practices discourse. So in terms of those types of things, we gave BRICS a score of 3.0 in terms of their decision authority and in terms of their narrative control, because they don't really have it. But even without those, their material leverage is undeniable. BRICS has a lot of power. So the overall RPI result for BRICS relative to BlackRock, their score is plus 14 over BlackRock. Okay, that's not global domination, but it is functional power, and it's growing, and it's sovereign, and it's resilient. And that tells us something critical. You don't have to defeat empire. You just have to make it irrelevant. You have to be able to walk away from it. You don't need to overthrow BlackRock. You just need to build a system in which BlackRock doesn't matter anymore. BlackRock has functional tools of discipline that it can pressure BRICS countries. You know, they can stigmatize your economy through the media, through ESG ratings, through investment ratings, and so forth. They can deny you investment. So we gave BlackRock a 5.5 in narrative control over BRICS. They have more control. They have that much control. And a 6.0 in immunity to retaliation, because let's face it, if you hit BlackRock, you might hurt yourself. But that's where the power stops. Let's be very clear. BlackRock cannot tell BRICS governments what to do. It has no decision authority over our states. Our states are still, alhamdulillah, predominantly reigning over the private sector, not the other way around, not like in the West. That's important. BlackRock is kind of like those vampires in the movie Sinners, where they have to be invited in. They can't impose themselves. They can't just bust in. They have to be invited. So what BRICS is doing right now is sort of breaking the illusion that BlackRock's participation is necessary. BRICS is building local capital ecosystems, like I said. They're building alternative ratings frameworks, state-backed banks, currency swap agreements. This is all important. Development institutions of their own that don't care about ESG ratings. This means that BRICS is building their adaptability and their insulation. So we scored them an 8.0 in terms of their adaptability reserve versus BlackRock. BlackRock still has influence, but its leverage is declining in value, you know, because if you can walk away from something, then you're not being ruled by that something. BlackRock needs BRICS more than BRICS needs BlackRock. BlackRock needs access to energy, rare earths, manufacturing, labor, population, growing populations, and promised returns on capital that the West can no longer generate. So we scored BlackRock's direct dependence on BRICS as 6.0, because without profitable exposure to BRICS markets, BlackRock's portfolios will collapse into stagnation if they have to rely on the Western markets. And as BRICS becomes more assertive and potentially nationalizes key sectors, decouples from Western financial rule books, BlackRock's exposure to disruption goes up. So we scored 6.5 because, for example, China or Russia can shut the door if they choose to on BlackRock. And the perceived vulnerability of BlackRock is growing. In the global south, in the BRICS countries, in the younger economies, BlackRock is not seen as invincible anymore. It is seen as extractive. It is seen as nefarious. It is seen as colonial. So BlackRock's relative power index over BRICS is just plus 8.5. So yes, that's a moderate level of leverage. It can shape investment flows, like I said. It can manipulate perceptions. It can apply market pressure and so forth. They have some power. But this leverage only works as long as BRICS chooses to remain integrated in the BlackRock world. And BRICS is building a different world. So from our perspective, this isn't just about replacing one hegemon with another. That's not what it's about. It's about ending the era of national dominance, where firms like BlackRock could treat governments like clients, could treat populations like assets, and could treat sovereignty as nothing but a nuisance. Okay, BRICS isn't fully there yet, but it's moving. And the more it invests in sovereign capital formation, in regional financial platforms, and narrative independence, the less power BlackRock is going to have over anyone in the BRICS nations and in the global south generally. So what does all this mean? It means that the tide is turning, like I've been talking about. The tide is turning, not with fireworks, not with revolutions, but with slow.
Hello, brothers and sisters. I really hope you're all doing fine from wherever you are watching me from now. Do you really believe this is the time for unity of all black people around the world? Do you actually believe that this is the time for decolonization for our minds and everything that comes with it? Do you believe this is the time for the liberation, the real liberation for the black people around the world? Do you actually believe that we can achieve racial equality and dignity? Now, these are some of the things that Shahid Bolsen has been talking about. This is a professor and he comes from Turkey, I think, something of the sort of Northern Ireland. And he has been talking about the real issues that faces the black community. He has been talking about the real issues that we need not just to hear, but we need to take into consideration. Now, Shahid Bolsen has been a key criticizer of the United States of America for all the injustices that they have committed against the world in the name of democracy. Now, he has been calling out the Western countries that claim to have brought civilization to Africa and to the black community, but of which they have done worse than you know, they have done worse than the civilization that they speak about. Now, do you believe that we can achieve racial equality and dignity? Now, Shahid Bolson has been calling out the white community for all the things that they have done to the African and to the black people around the world. Now, he has even been calling out for the same injustices that they have committed to the Arabs, to the Semites and to the Red Indians. Now, there is need for us to discuss about some very key issues here. You know that there is a core belief that people of African descent deserve equal treatment, and respect and dignity. It should not be a core belief. This is the fact, and this should be tabled with a lot of ideologies for all those who disagree with this, because I think this is basic knowledge that we all should be treated with equality, because there is no need for you to come and mistreat people in their own land. There is no need for you to come in the name of democracy and later on erase all the good things, erase all the democracy that existed before you came with your own democracy. Now, if you're a good believer of political science and you've studied and you know something about it, you must believe that there are games being played in the DRC Congo, which I do not want to talk about right now, because there are chaos everywhere in Africa, most places in Africa where there is mineral resources. And why is that so? Those countries that have been classified as the poorest countries and the most dangerous and the most unsafe, are the countries with the biggest resources. They have gold, they have uranium, they have diamonds, and all these are precious metals that are needed in the world. But these are the war-torn zones of Africa. Why is that so? Why do we have to destroy in the name of building democracy? These are the main questions, and these are the main factors that have brought around the big discussion of racial equality and dignity around the world. And Shahid Bolson has not run short of saying this. I love sharing some of his videos because he really speaks the truth. We should not at no point should we accept that someone else is bringing democracy for you. What sort of democracy, what special democracy do you need when people are taking out your mineral resources, when people are crying, and when wars are being funded in Africa, when coup d'etats are being funded in Africa? What sort of democracy do we want? Is that the democracy we want? No, we want a free state. We want free countries where our own people, our own brothers and sisters take the mandate and they can lead their people with much wisdom, because they are the ones who understand the problems of their own countries, Now, the colonization and liberation of Africa and the black mind is really needed at the moment, because the African nations must be free themselves, and there is no need. We should land back to the colonial rule and the external domination in our own countries. We should actually say no to that, We say that we got independence, and we had that mentality in us, but do we really have that democracy with us? Do we have the democracy with us? Do we have the freedoms? Do we have the independence that we claimed and that which blood was spilled? Do we really have them? And our goal is political independence and self-determination in Africa, and the freedom from eco and neo-colonialism, that someone else thinks they might give you loans so that they might get control of your economy, What loans do we need in Africa? That's a question, food Food for thought, that one is. If Africa is the producer of everything, food, raw materials, and everything, why do we need loans? What do we need loans for? If the people pay taxes and there is maybe a deficit in the budget, what why can't we squeeze the same budget? Some things are very unnecessary, of course. Why do we have big state houses? Why do we have big presidential convoys in Africa? These are there and they're being supported by the West just to misuse your taxes. And by that, your country will run into a deficit, into a budget deficit, which will require them to borrow from the outside world to come and fill the gap, and maybe to fund money for education, the health ministry, and all that. It is the Western countries that actually advise your presidents, to have that large convoy, to have everything, that luxurious life, and so many other unnecessary things. If these budgets could be trimmed down, and if the presidents could be living within the means of their own countries and budgets, we could be having no deficits in our own budgets, and which has led us to be borrowing more, from the outside. We borrow more from the outside just to accommodate the luxurious lives that these Western puppets have in our own countries. We ain't going to buy that. We ain't going to accept that. And when we talk about the unity of Black people around the world, every African around the world, and every Black people everywhere, whether in Africa, the Americas, the Caribbean, or Europe, actually share a common heritage and destiny. And for this one reason, we must be together. For this one reason, we must foster political, economic, social, cultural unity across all national and regional boundaries in Africa. The only reason we have the African continent divided this much is because of the boundaries that we have today. I do not advocate for a free boundary Africa, but I advocate for a more united Africa, a more collaborative Africa, There is no need for us actually to have a problem when we are going to have unity, both in the political, economical, and social spaces in Africa. Why will you have a problem when Africans and Black people are coming together, whether in the Americas, in the Caribbean, in Africa, everywhere across the world? Why will you have a problem? And I really love it that Shahid Bolsen is really enlightening the Black people. He's really enlightening you and me who are sleeping and thinking that there is a special someone that is coming to save us. There is nothing of that sort. And there is need for us to have the cultural pride and African of the Black identity. That's whatever was taken from us, and we must really fight for that. Brothers and sisters, we must not leave anything to slide at this moment. We really need to come together, foster, and actually realize that there is a lot more that can be achieved when we actually accept our own culture and heritage, when we actually accept ourselves as one, that we share the same heritage, we share the same culture, we share the same dignity, and there is need for us to be one. No one is coming to tell you that, of course. No one. Because the aim was to divide Africa, and it was divided. The aim is to conquer you now. They conquered. The aim is to control you. They have the full control. The systems that were set are the same systems that will finish us, And we must say no to imperialism. And we must not accept this. And we must reject cultural imperialism, that we are trying to bond with a culture that is not ours, that you're trying to please someone by dressing like them, that you're trying to please someone just because if you embrace Africanity or the Black heritage, then they say you're backwards. That's the Western mentality that was inflicted into your brain to make sure that you never think outside the box. There is need for economic empowerment and self-reliance as Black people, and we must not accept anyone interfering with that. Now, African people must control their own economy, their own resources, their own destiny. That's the goal. And that's whatever should be happening at the moment. Now, we must develop all African industries and resist any exploitation from the outside. If we do this, then we are able to promote trade amongst the African countries, and we are able to promote Africanism, and we are able to promote the Black heritage, the Black culture around the world. We must not buy fear, and to the global diaspora solidarity, it should remain that way. We should actually have an engagement with our own brothers, and we should have a link. We should unite, and we should actually say that enough is enough of the division that is existing amongst ourselves. Now, the diaspora is one thing. We should actually know that, and the diaspora is part of the Africa's future. Whether we say no to it, whether we live in a utopia, whether we live in denial, that's the reality. One day, one time, the diaspora that we always talk about will be the diaspora that will be building Africa. And we need to encourage collaboration between the continents of Africa, the Caribbean, and the people of the Black community. And we should bring decency to the African man. We should bring decency to the African people around the world. Education and political consciousness is a must for us all. We must understand where we came from. I've always been saying we are the custodians of our own history. And if we slide, then it is done. We keep the history. We are the ones that belong to the history. And we must encourage ourselves to be one. We must bring ourselves to book. Where did we go wrong? And where do we need to amend the wrongs we did? A lot can be said, brothers and sisters, but without the right things being done, it's like nothing. We must have unity of purpose, not just unity. It must be unity of purpose. The unity that is going to bring Africa together, the unity that is going to bridge the gaps between us, the unity that is going to make Africa great. Thank you so much for having taken the time to watch this video. I really appreciate it. If it's your first time on this channel, please consider subscribing, sharing, liking, and commenting for us to know whatever you need to be consuming from the channel. Thank you so much. See you in our next episode.